Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And welcome to our last Feminist Around the World for 2024. If you're listening to this within this year, or if not, just so you know, this is the last one in 2024. And today we are featuring queer and human rights activist and environmental activist, Rosanna Flamer Caldera. So Flamer Caldera is the founder and executive director of Equal Ground, which is the oldest organization in Sri Lanka to advocate for the human rights and protections of the LGBTQIA community. Of course, much like our other activists we feature, she has had many different titles and positions in her life. She's been at the forefront in fighting for her people and her community as well. So when we talk about one specific thing that she has done, please note, again, like many of our other activists, there are so many other things that she has done or she is doing, including being a political figure somewhat as well. So put that little asterisk there. I think we'll just put that asterisk forever on all of our activists. So Flamer Caldera was born in Sri Lanka and grew up in Colombo. At 18, she left Sri Lanka and made her way to San Francisco, which, by the way, I listened to a podcast that featured her, and they called San Francisco the gay capital of the U.S. And I was like, oh, I guess once upon a time it really was, but that's changed since then, I would assume. We should go back and look at that. Do we have what we would say a gay capital?
I think it's more widespread than one city now, but it used to be San Francisco.
It used to be, yeah. But I'm like, that's such an old thought process because of that. Anyway, going back, it is there. She says she participated in her first Pride Parade. And here's a bit from a 2016 article about her time then, featured on Altui World. Quote, Rosanna Flamer Caldera left her native Sri Lanka at age 18. She said, I was having a hard time coming to terms with my sexuality, and Sri Lanka was just not a place where women could get ahead. She spent her young adulthood in San Francisco, where she participated in activism through direct action tactics like demonstrations, marches, and vigils. In 1978, Harvey Milk led the first Pride Parade Rosanna Flamer Caldera, a Sri Lankan then in her early 20s, ever participated in. And she does talk a lot about her experience for that event. And even when Milk was assassinated, she talks about that event and how it really impacted her and how she was a part of that as well. So I thought that was pretty significant to note. This is her first experience, which is iconic. And she has been working to bring similar celebrations and activism for the LGBTQIA community to her own home in Colombo. But her upbringing and family have always supported equal rights and activism. And she talks about how liberal they were and very accepting they were in general. But that didn't mean she felt like she could be completely open and honest about herself. As she told interviewers, it took some time for her to accept herself, but was finally able to open up and be her true self when coming to San Francisco. Like, she talked about how that really changed her perspective. And then she told the story about, I believe, a cousin of hers took her to a lesbian club. And things started clicking. I love those moments. I feel like she really had like the iconic coming out experience in San Francisco. I see why they call it the capital here. Becoming her true self also propelled her activism. She talks with Women Talks, a media organization out of Sri Lanka, about her starting Equal Ground, which is her organization, in the activism in Sri Lanka. She says, I know what it felt like being a lesbian in a country where it was completely taboo. When I was growing up there was no equal ground to advise me or hold my hand. But I had the privilege of living in San Francisco for about 15 years. There, I was able to come out and be myself and then come out to my parents, who have been an incredible support throughout my entire life's journey. And though her initial activism was centered around environmental issues, apparently I think her family is very involved in activism for that as well. That soon changed when she came back to Sri Lanka. Here's some more from that same article. We started the Women's Support Group in 1999. I subsequently went to Oakland, California for a conference for the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Trans, and Intersex Associations, or ILGA. There, I had the opportunity to be involved in the Asian region of ILGA. I was elected the female representative to the board of ILGA. In 2003, I was asked to nominate myself for the female co-secretary general's position. Then I became the co-secretary general of ILGA, and that lasted for 2 terms from 2003 to 2008. That actually really helped to inform and also define my activism. Yeah, and with all of those, she went through these ups and downs with different organizations. She really talks about how it wasn't really all-inclusive. We've heard this so many times when it comes to organizations that are too niche. So she would be a part of one and it's just focusing on women, did not want to talk about the queer community, or they did not want to talk about racism, all that. So many things. But she talked about those kinds of ups and downs that she experienced. So Flamer Caldera went on to form Equal Ground. And here's what she had to say about this organization. There was really no advocacy being done around LGBTIQ rights in a way that included the full spectrum of the queer community in Sri Lanka. So I decided to form Equal Ground along with some friends and particularly with some women who were with me at the WSG, so Women's Association. We never looked back after that. We started Equal Ground in June 2004. In December, we had that awful tsunami. We spent the whole of 2005 collecting funds from LGBTIQ persons all over the world through ILGA and a few other organizations to help out with the tsunami relief efforts. And yeah, she did talk in depth about that impact, how so many people we know died. They've talked about it, and there's still damages that have not been addressed since then. So she's worked really hard in trying to help her community as a whole once again. And here's some information about the organization itself from their own website. equal-ground.org says, Equal Ground is a non-profit organization seeking economic, social, cultural, civil, and political rights for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and questioning/queer, or LGBTIQ, community of Sri Lanka. We are committed to creating a safe space for all LGBTIQ individuals and to provide opportunities for self-help, including mental well-being, economic, social, and political empowerment, access to health, education, housing, and legal protection for the LGBTIQ community. Equal Ground is one of the truly diverse organizations in Sri Lanka, which includes the wider identities of the LGBTIQ community in Sri Lanka, as well as our heterosexual allies and friends. So they have so much on their website. If you get a chance, go look it up because they talk about all the works that they've done. And there's so much we didn't want to bypass all the in-depth details they had. So you should definitely go check out their site. On their site, they do give some insight about the environment they are working in and the types of things that they're having to deal with. So they say, Sri Lankan society is structured on strict gender roles and responsibilities, where anything different to heteronormativity and binary gender standards is considered abnormal, deviant, and deserving of punishment/discrimination. As a result of our colonial past, same-sex sexual relationships between consenting adults is deemed a criminal act punishable with up to 10 years in prison. As a result, social stigmas are attached to homosexuality and transgenderism. This stigma is heavily institutionalized, resulting in the discrimination and marginalization of members of the LGBTIQ community and those perceived as members of the LGBTIQ community. Due to the lack of understanding of gender identity and sexual orientation and misinterpreted religious cultural doctrine, LGBTIQ persons are often forced into heterosexual marriages, subject to curative rape or face violence within the confines of their homes and in public. Individuals who are thus mistreated are denied access to justice and medical attention because they fear the repercussions of their different sexual orientation or gender identity becoming public knowledge, and also because the instances of further abuse at the hands of the authorities is a probable threat. So definitely a lot to take in that conversation, in the persecution of the queer community. We've seen it, we know it exists, and we also know there are people who are fighting, just like Flamer Caldera. But with this, from their own site, they include the work they've been doing, which includes educating the community about the LGBTQIA community, offering legal counsel, assisting in health and mental health needs, working to change policies and laws that are very harmful to the queer community, and so much more, including the fact they're also working in the tech space to make it more accessible, as well as using it for advocacy and teaching others. So really, really cool stuff that they're doing. So Flamer Caldera has been on the front line pushing back against the laws and policies that discriminate and harm the LGBTIQ community. In fact, in 2022, she presented a case to the UN stating that Sri Lanka's ban on same-sex consensual relationships were a violation of human rights. And here's a bit from her feature in Time magazine. Flamer Caldera has spent more than 2 decades advocating for the LGBTQ rights in Sri Lanka, and her relentless advocacy led to a major victory for queer women globally. In a landmark decision in 2022, the UN sided with Flamer Caldera in her case against Sri Lanka's ban on same-sex intimacy between women, declaring it a human rights violation. The case brought LGBTQ rights to the fore in Sri Lankan politics, and soon after the decision, a lawmaker introduced a bill to decriminalize homosexuality in that country. So this is from a 2024 Times article. The bill at this point, it could pass in the Sri Lankan parliament, which Equal Ground is continuing to work to make sure it does. So they're fighting for that. That's being heard. And apparently it's pretty favorable. So we'll see. And like so many of our amazing activists we have featured, Flamer Caldera has been recognized for her work, including being named Time Magazine's Most Influential People of 2024, which is why, yes, we found her. She also received a 2022 APCOM Community Hero Award, and so much more. And I'm sure we're going to hear so much more about what she's doing, especially with the fact that they're changing so much in Sri Lanka, and really hope that they're able to get this done, because that would be an amazing victory for the world and for themselves.
Yes. We'll definitely be checking in on that and really hoping that it goes through. In the meantime, listeners, as always, you can contact us if you have any suggestions, updates, resources. You can email us at stephanie@momstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter and Blue Sky at momstuffpodcast, or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff One Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have a TeePublic store, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff Never Told You is a production by iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.